She was just 19, 19, a life so full of promise, a spirit so bright. She was a cherished friend, a beloved daughter, a young woman just standing at the doorway of her future, ready to step through. But in the freezing dark hours of a February morning back in 2018, Lizette Cuesta's name would become etched in our memories, not for the vibrant life she lived, but for the utterly horrifying way she died, and for the incredible courage she showed when faced with pure evil. Imagine this: dumped on a lonely, desolate stretch of Tesla Road in Livermore, California. She was bleeding, broken beyond words, yet with a bravery that I can hardly comprehend, Lizette crawled. She dragged herself nearly 100 yards through the pitch-black night. And then, with what must have been her very last breaths, she did something truly astonishing. She named her killers. This isn't just a story of a sickeningly brutal murder. Oh no, it's so much more. This is the story of a strength that seems to defy human limits. It's a story of a devastating betrayal by people she thought she could trust. And it's the story of how a few whispered words, spoken from the edge of death, brought her killers to justice. It's a story that leaves you asking, how could this happen? How could people be so cruel? You are watching Secrets in the Shadows, and this is the tragic, unforgettable, and unbelievably unfair case of Lizette Cuesta. The terrible story of what happened to Lizette Cuesta began in the most normal way. On the night of February 11th, 2018, after finishing her shift at Carl's Jr. in Tracy, Lizette made a choice she didn't know would cost her life. She got into a car with two people she knew from work, 19-year-old Daniel Gross and his 25-year-old girlfriend, Melissa Leonardo. Because she knew them, it probably felt safe, like nothing bad could happen. But how could she know the darkness hiding beneath that safe feeling? The three of them worked the same shifts, so it wasn't strange for coworkers to share a ride or hang out after work. But that night, the ride wasn't normal at all. Instead of going home or somewhere safe, the car drove to a lonely, empty place far away. What was said in that car? What happened before the attack? We don't know. The stories from Daniel and Melissa don't match. They only want to protect themselves, and the silence from them is loud. It shows they're hiding the truth. After his arrest, Daniel Gross gave an interview from jail. He told a story that made him look better. He said he and Lizette were friends, and that they had a relationship where both agreed to be together. He said they smoked marijuana that night, and at one point, he and Lizette were in the back of the car being intimate while Melissa was driving. But these are the words of someone accused of murder. It's hard to know what happened. His story feels like a desperate way to hide what he did. What is clear and chilling is that Lizette was taken far from home, far from safety or help. The car drove to Tesla Road in Livermore, a lonely, empty road known for being very quiet at night. This was no accident. It was a planned trip to a place where no one would hear her screams, a place perfect for something terrible to happen in the dark. Why would someone take a young coworker, someone they knew, to such a place with such horrible plans? At first, no one knew the answer. The police didn't share many details, but that ride, which started like a normal chat after work, became the start of Lizette Cuesta's last horrible and so unfair suffering. And there, on that empty, lonely stretch of Tesla Road, under a cold, dark, uncaring sky, the unthinkable happened. Lizette Cuesta faced a level of violence that honestly It chills me to the bone just to speak about. She was cruelly, heartlessly attacked, stabbed more than 24 times. The assault was savage, a wild, hateful violence that left her with injuries so awful they're hard to even imagine, including a slashed throat. After that brutal, inhuman stabbing, Lizette was either thrown from the car or simply left on that dark roadside, abandoned by her attackers to die alone in the freezing cold. How could anyone do this to another human being? It's a question that echoes in the silence of such cruelty. The sheer force of the attack, it points to a chilling, clear intent. This wasn't a quick, sudden burst of violence. No, this was ongoing. It was brutal, and it was clearly meant to ensure she wouldn't survive. Charging documents, filed later by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, would claim that Daniel Gross was the one who used the knife, the one who caused those terrible wounds. In that jailhouse interview I mentioned, Gross offered this desperate and, frankly, widely doubted claim of self-defense. He stated he snapped after Lizette supposedly elbowed him. He had the nerve to insist he never meant to kill her. A claim that just doesn't sound believable when you picture the scene. More than 20 stab wounds, including terrible injuries to her head, her neck, and her back. His co-defendant, his fiancée at the time, Melissa Leonardo, was also present. She was driving the car, according to Gross, though he weakly tried to say that she had no part in the killing itself, as if that clears her of her role in this nightmare. The scene on Tesla Road that night, I can only imagine it must have been one of pure, total horror. Lizette, so terribly wounded, bleeding heavily, found herself in an almost completely hopeless situation. Miles from anywhere, in the pitch dark, with no immediate help in sight, the odds of her survival were practically zero. The pain she must have been feeling, it must have been agonizing, the terror overwhelming. Yet, what happened next wasn't a quiet giving up to the darkness. What happened next was a display of the human spirit, a will to live that was truly extraordinary, truly heroic. Even after such a vicious, soul-crushing betrayal by people she knew, people she'd willingly gone with, Lizette Cuesta began to fight back, not with violence, because how could she, but with an incredible, unbelievable will to survive and to ensure her attackers didn't simply vanish into the night, unpunished, abandoned on that remote, dark stretch of Tesla Road, bleeding heavily from over 24 stab wounds. Lizette Cuesta should have died quickly. That's the horrible truth. But Lizette, as her father said, she was a fighter. And in an act of what I can only describe as almost superhuman strength, fueled by pure, raw willpower, she started to move. Despite pain beyond words, the kind of terror that would paralyze most, and a life-threatening blood loss, Lizette Cuesta crawled. Can you even imagine? She dragged her battered, broken body nearly 100 yards, that's the length of a football field, along that empty roadside. Inch by painful inch, she pulled herself forward, clinging to the smallest hope of being seen, towards the tiniest, most unlikely chance that a passing car might spot her in the deep darkness. The effort, it must have been huge, each movement a painful, silent sign of her absolute refusal to give up. A blood trail stark and shocking marked her desperate journey towards help, towards justice. Witnesses who eventually, thankfully, found her described a scene of total horror. She was covered in so much blood, her injuries so severe, that some initially thought she was missing an arm. The first driver to see a shape on the roadside was reportedly too afraid to stop in such an isolated area especially so early in the morning. And while that's a chilling thought, it's perhaps an understandable reaction to such a terrifying unknown. However, and this is so important, that driver did the right thing. They called 911 as soon as they reached an area with cell service, alerting police to the horror on Tesla Road. Soon after, other drivers did stop. One of them was a man named Richard Lodholt. He found Lizette clinging desperately to life. She told him, her voice probably so weak that she felt she was going to die. Mr. Lodholt, with amazing kindness, in such a horrifying moment, tried to keep her talking, to keep her awake, to encourage her to keep fighting. I said, "No, you aren't going to. You are going to fight. You're going to sit up. You're not laying down, and you're going to be all right," he recalled later. Those who stopped, these kind strangers, covered her with a blanket, offering what little comfort they could, and some even prayed with her as they anxiously, desperately waited for emergency services to arrive. Lizette's incredible crawl, that painful 100-yard journey, it wasn't just a desperate attempt for her own life, though it was certainly that. It was the first vital, key step in bringing her killers to justice. By moving herself to a more visible location, she made sure she would be found before it was too late for her voice, her story, to be heard. Her physical strength was fading, disappearing with every drop of blood, but her inner strength, her sheer determination, was burning with an amazing, unbelievable power. This was Lizette, fighting with every last bit of her being, not just for survival, but for the chance to speak, the chance to ensure this terrible act of violence wouldn't go unanswered. When the first responders, the firefighters, and highway patrol officers arrived at that terrible, heartbreaking scene on Tesla Road, Lizette Cuesta, though so horribly injured and dangerously close to death, was clear-headed. She was remarkably, almost unbelievably calm. It was in these vital, short moments, with the very last of her strength, that she delivered her most powerful, most damning strike against her attackers. She began to speak, and her words, those precious fading words, would become the very foundation of the case against the people who did this to her. It's a moment that sends shivers down my spine, thinking of her focus, her will in such pain. Lizette clearly and directly identified the people responsible for this brutal, savage attack. She named Daniel Gross and Melissa Leonardo, and she didn't just give their names. No, she gave details. She told what had happened to her, who she was with, and the awful details of the assault. She repeated this vital information to the paramedics during the desperate flight as she was airlifted to Eden Medical Center in Castro Valley. And then again, she found the strength to tell it to law enforcement officers as she lay in a hospital bed, her life slipping away with every passing second. She clung to life for about 2 hours after being found, and in that precious borrowed time, she made absolutely sure her story was told. What unbelievable courage that must have taken. This act, giving such a detailed account and naming her attackers in the absolute belief she was about to die, is known in legal terms as a dying declaration. Such statements, I have learned, are rare, very rare, but they are very powerful exceptions to the hearsay rule in court. And why is that? Because it's believed, and I think rightly so, that a person who knows they're about to die, who is facing their own death, isn't going to waste their final precious breaths on a lie, especially not about how and why they're dying. For a statement to count as a dying declaration, the person must have personal knowledge of what they're saying, and they must truly believe that their death is coming soon, that it's right there, about to happen. Lizette's statements, her brave words, fit these rules perfectly, tragically so. Sergeant Ray Kelly of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office described Lizette's clarity and her sheer determination in these final moments as pretty remarkable. He stressed just how rare such declarations are in murder investigations. I've worked well over 100 murders in my career, and I can think of 2 or 3, Sergeant Kelly stated. And that just highlights how truly unusual, how amazing Lizette's case was. Her dying words weren't just a plea for help or a jumbled, confused memory. They were a clear, convincing, and completely damning account that gave investigators exactly what they needed to pursue justice. It's almost impossible for me to imagine the courage it took for Lizette, while suffering unbelievable physical pain and the deep shock of such a horrible betrayal, to focus her fading mind, her slipping life force, on delivering this vital information. She was, in effect, solving her own murder from her deathbed. Her voice, though surely weakened by her horrific injuries, rang with truth and an unbending, powerful demand for justice. It was a final, heroic act of defiance against those who had tried, with such brutality, to silence her forever. And they failed. They failed because of Lizette. Lizette Cuesta's dying declaration, those words spoken with her last strength, was more than just a moving, heartbreaking final act. It was an incredible, priceless gift to law enforcement, as Sergeant Ray Kelly of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office so perfectly put it. Her clear, steady identification of Daniel Gross and Melissa Leonardo, along with the key details of the attack she provided, allowed investigators to skip what could have been days or even weeks of hard, frustrating work just to identify her, and then to try and find potential suspects. Instead, armed with Lizette's undeniable, powerful testimony, authorities moved with amazing, almost unheard of speed. This, in itself, shows her unbelievable strength. Within just 12 hours of Lizette being found on that empty road, investigators had located and arrested Daniel Gross and Melissa Leonardo at their home in Modesto. 12 hours. This rapid arrest was absolutely vital. As Sergeant Kelly highlighted, the delay that would have certainly happened without Lizette's immediate, life-saving information could have seriously, terribly risked the entire case. A crime scene that likely would have been gone or would have been destroyed had we got there days or weeks later, he explained, referring to the important evidence that was found at the suspect's Modesto home. Lizette's words, her courage, got investigators exactly where we needed to be at the exact right time. It's almost as if she reached out from the brink to guide them. The information she provided enabled law enforcement to save crucial evidence that might otherwise have been lost forever, cleaned up, or thrown away by the very people who had committed this terrible act. A huge amount of evidence, I'm told, was reportedly found at the couple's home, further strengthening the already strong case against them. And this was a direct, clear result of the swift action that Lizette's brave declaration made possible. It's a chilling thought what might have happened if she hadn't been able to speak. The impact of her words was immediate. It was final. There was no long, painful mystery hanging in the air, no desperate, lengthy search for leads. Lizette had pointed directly at her killers, her voice ringing with truth, and the justice system could begin its serious work without delay. Her internal strength, that incredible will to stay alive long enough to provide this information, was, as Sergeant Kelly described it, pretty remarkable. She hadn't just fought for her life in those last terrible moments. She'd ensured that her fight would continue even after her death, guiding the hands of justice directly to those responsible for her murder. The speed of the arrests, a direct result of her incredible bravery, offered a small, quick measure of comfort to a horrified community and a family dealing with unimaginable grief. It was proof of a young woman who, even in her darkest, most terrifying hour, found a way to make her voice, her life count in the most meaningful way possible. The people Lizette Cuesta named with her dying breaths, the ones responsible for cutting her life so brutally short, were her acquaintances, her co-workers from Carl's Jr., 19-year-old Daniel Lee Benjamin Gross, and 25-year-old Melissa Jill Leonardo. It's a fact that still shocks me, that people she knew, people she worked alongside, could be capable of such awful betrayal. The pair lived together in Modesto, California. Investigators believed they were in a relationship. Leonardo was reportedly Gross's fiancé, and in another troubling part of this whole nightmare, was said to be pregnant around the time of their court appearances in May 2018. Daniel Gross, barely an adult himself at 19, was identified by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office as the one who allegedly used the knife. He was the one who inflicted those more than 24 horrible stab wounds that ultimately killed Lizette. His charge, stark and damning, included a special note of using a knife. In that jailhouse interview he gave to KTVU reporter Henry Lee, just days after his arrest, Gross came across as inconsistent, often hard to understand, his words a jumbled mess. He admitted to stabbing Lizette, yes, but then he had the nerve to claim it was self-defense, saying she had elbowed him and that he just snapped. He said he never intended to kill her, a statement that rings so hollow, so false, against the brutal reality of the attack. Gross also told Lee that he and Lizette were friends and had a sexual relationship they both agreed to. He claimed that on the night of the murder, they had smoked pot and were intimate in the back of the car while Leonardo drove. He even expressed some kind of remorse, saying he felt like hate myself. It's hard to know what to make of such statements, coming from someone accused of such a terrible crime. Interestingly, or perhaps cleverly, Gross claimed that Leonardo had nothing to do with the killing itself, maybe trying to protect his fiancée. He also said he wasn't mad at Lizette for identifying him. How kind of him. Melissa Leonardo, 6 years older than Gross, faced the same murder charge, though without that special note of weapon use. Neighbors in Modesto, where Gross and Leonardo shared their home, reported seeing different people frequently coming and going from the house. This led one neighbor to suspect that something suspicious going on out there, while Gross tried to shift direct blame from Leonardo for the act of stabbing. Her presence, her alleged role as the driver who took Lizette to that remote, scary location, and her actions, or, just as importantly, her complete failure to help Lizette, made her a part of this horrific crime in the eyes of the law. She drove Lizette to her death. The motive, that burning question of why, for such a vicious, inhuman attack on someone they knew, a coworker, it remained unclear in the initial reports. Authorities didn't immediately release a specific reason. Gross's weak claims of snapping don't offer any real insight into the planning or the circumstances that could possibly lead to such extreme, sickening violence. The relationship between Gross, Leonardo, and Lizette, and what exactly triggered that fatal, brutal encounter, are questions that the legal process would hopefully aim to explore and uncover. Both of them were held without bail at the Santa Rita jail in Dublin after their swift arrest. Their capture directly, without a doubt because of Lizette's final, brave words, ensured they would have to face the consequences of their horrible, unforgivable actions. With Daniel Gross and Melissa Leonardo in custody, a direct and amazing result of Lizette Cuesta's courageous dying declaration, the slow, steady wheels of the legal process began to turn. Both were charged with murder. Gross's charge, as I mentioned, was even more severe, including that special note for using a knife, which showed the prosecution's strong belief that he was the one who used the weapon. He was the one who carried out the stabbing that ended Lizette's young life. It's a chilling detail that highlights the brutality she faced. Lizette's final statements, those words spoken from the very edge of death, were set to be a central, very powerful piece of evidence in court. As we've discussed, a dying declaration is such a strong exception to the usual rules about hearsay evidence. Those rules that normally prevent out-of-court statements from being used to prove the truth of something. California Evidence Code, Section 1242, specifically allows for evidence of a statement made by a dying person respecting the cause and circumstances of his death, if the statement was made upon his personal knowledge and under a sense of immediately impending death. Legal experts have confirmed time and again that these declarations carry serious, undeniable weight with juries. Why? Because people generally believe, and I think intuitively so, that someone who is facing certain near death is highly unlikely to lie. Lizette's detailed account, given so consistently to multiple first responders and officers while she was in unimaginable pain and knew she was dying, fit this definition perfectly. Her words were a guiding light of truth in a sea of darkness. The quick arrests, which were entirely due to Lizette's testimony, also played such a key role in saving other vital evidence that the suspects might have otherwise had the chance to destroy or hide. This powerful combination, a compelling, heartbreaking dying declaration, and quickly gathered supporting physical evidence, built a strong, almost undeniable case for the prosecution. Justice, it seemed, was on its way, carried forward by Lizette's own voice. Then, in what I can only describe as a surprising turn, during a routine pretrial hearing in Alameda County Superior Court in Dublin on May 10, 2018, Daniel Gross decided to plead guilty. His attorney, Assistant Public Defender Eric Mirzayan, stated that Gross was committed to accepting responsibility for his friend's death right from the start, pointing to his confessions to the police and to the media as proof of this supposed commitment. Mirzayan expressed Gross's hope that this decision, his guilty plea, would bring some measure of peace and closure to Ms. Cuesta's family and loved ones by avoiding a long, painful court battle. The specifics of his plea, whether it was to first-degree murder, which carries a sentence of 25 years to life, or second-degree murder, which is 15 years to life, were to be decided at a later sentencing hearing. While a guilty plea avoids a trial, I can't help but wonder if it truly brings peace or if it's just another step in a long, painful journey for Lizette's family. Melissa Leonardo, on the other hand, pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. Her case was set to continue through the court system, with more pretrial hearings scheduled. So, for her, the fight for her to be held responsible was still ongoing. The legal process, as it unfolded, truly highlighted the deep, incredible impact of Lizette's final act. Her words not only led directly to the immediate capture of her killers, but also greatly shaped the path to justice, pushing one of her attackers to admit his guilt relatively early on. Even as the legal system moved forward, step by difficult step, it was so very clear that Lizette Cuesta, through her extraordinary, unbelievable courage, remained the most powerful, the most convincing witness in her own case. Lizette Cuesta's story, as we've walked through it together, is truly chilling. It's a harsh reminder of the unbelievable darkness that some people are capable of, a darkness that can feel overwhelming. But it's also, and this is so important, an incredible, inspiring example of the strength of the human spirit, to the light that can shine even in the most terrifying situations. If Lizette's bravery, her sheer will to fight for justice, even as her life was unfairly stolen, has moved you tonight, as it has deeply moved me, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with others so her story of heroism, her incredible courage, can continue to be heard, to make an impact, and to inspire. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to Secrets in the Shadows. We're dedicated to bringing you more stories that explore the difficult sides of true crime, stories that honor the amazing strength of victims and their families, and stories that demand we never forget. In the comments below, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. What struck you most about Lizette's incredible courage? How do you feel about the impact a victim's own voice can have in the desperate search for justice? Your engagement, your thoughts, your voice. It helps us keep these important stories alive, and it helps us ensure that victims like Lizette are never, ever forgotten. Lizette Cuesta's murder, so brutal, so senseless, sent waves of horror and disbelief through her community. It left a deep, aching scar on her family and her friends, a wound that I imagine will never truly heal. The sheer violence of the crime was horrifying enough, but it was Lizette's incredible, almost unimaginable courage in her final hours that truly defined her story for the public and for me. She wasn't just a victim in this awful story. She was a hero. She actively, amazingly, helped bring her own killers to justice. How many people can say that? Her father, Ray Cuesta, expressed feelings that were so deeply filled with both intense, soul-crushing grief and huge, overflowing pride. "I'm proud of her," he stated, his words heavy with emotion. "You know, she showed them that she didn't give up. She won, you know. I mean, I know she passed away, but when they did this to her, they figured, you know, they got away with it. And she didn't let them get away with it. She brought peace to herself, and she brought peace to me and my family." Those words just perfectly capture Lizette's lasting legacy. Even in death, even after suffering the unspeakable, she won against her attackers by ensuring they were held responsible. That is a victory born from unimaginable pain, but a victory nonetheless. Her uncle, Roberto Cuesta, felt the exact same way, stressing the deep sense of closure that her brave actions provided. "That goes a long way," he said. "Otherwise we wouldn't know what happened. There would be no closure. And that lack of knowing, that emptiness, can be an agony all its own." The family also expressed great thanks for the kindness of strangers like Richard Lodholt. that wonderful driver who stopped and comforted Lizette in her final moments on that cold, dark road. They vowed to thank him for his kindness, a small light in such a huge darkness. Friends remembered her lively personality, her catching energy, and her unique passions. At a gathering held at the Great Oaks Park Skate Park in San Jose, a place where Lizette loved to feel free on her skateboard, friends like Lucy Uribe mourned the loss of such a bright, irreplaceable spirit. "I don't know why this happened to her, because she didn't deserve it," Lucy said sadly, voicing a feeling that I'm sure we all feel. She deserved a long, happy life. Another friend, Christian, vowed to skate and have fun for her, a simple yet very moving tribute to keep her memory alive in the activities she loved. Jackie Chan, a high school friend, spoke of the shock and the deep sadness that spread through their community, stressing the hard lesson that you just can't get involved with the wrong people. He felt that speaking about her, even to news crews in the midst of such pain, was what Lizette would have wanted, a way to honor the lively, wonderful person. Lizette Cuesta's legacy, then, is one of extraordinary, unforgettable courage in the face of horrible, unimaginable evil. Her final act, that brave whisper of truth, ensured that her voice was the last one heard, a voice that cried out for justice and against all odds was answered. She's remembered not for the horror that was done to her, but for the incredible, awe-inspiring strength she showed in making absolutely sure that horror wouldn't go unpunished. Her story, as tragic and unfair as it is, continues to be a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the deep, lasting impact one person's bravery can have, even at the very end of their life. Lizette Cuesta's story is truly haunting. It settles deep within you, a chilling reminder of the cruelty that can exist in this world. But, and I hold on to this fiercely, it's also deeply heroic. In her final, desperate moments, with her life fading away, she gave investigators everything they needed to solve her murder. She gave them the truth. She faced the unthinkable, a betrayal so deep, an attack so savage, and still, somehow, she found the strength to speak. Her voice didn't just echo through the empty darkness of Tesla Road that night. No, her voice, her courage, it echoed across a nation, touching hearts and demanding that we listen. She was so much more than a victim of a horrific crime. She was a fighter through and through. She was her own champion, even when she had no strength left. And she made sure, with her last breath, that her killers didn't just walk free, that they didn't get away with what they did. Let her incredible bravery, her unbending spirit, never, ever be forgotten. And if you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship or facing violence or abuse of any kind, please, I urge you, speak up, get help, reach out. You're not alone, and there are people who want to support you. Lizette's story is a tragic reminder of what can happen, but it also shows the power of a voice. Please use yours. Thank you for joining me on Secrets in the Shadows. I'm Charlotte, and I'll see you in my next video.